It's 4:30, so we'll call to order the Dunn County Judicial and Law Committee. First order is call the roll, and it looks like all 5 members are present. So we'll move on to number 3, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Motion by Jetson, second by Gilberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move on. Number 4, any public comments, Katie? Okay. We'll move on to number 5, staff reports. And first up is the medical examiner. Do you know, is Marcy online? Okay. We will move on to sheriff, and sheriff said he would be gone too in this meeting. We'll move on to C in court. Katie?
I don't have anything else to add unless there's any questions.
Seeing, oh, go ahead.
The scanning and forfeiture cases have finally completed. That means you bring in no more of that money?
Well, it doesn't mean that we're not bringing in the money. If there's money outstanding, we'll still collect on it, but it just means that they're all electronic case files. So
Okay.
once they reach their retention period, we will purge them, so they will no longer ever exist in CCAP.
Okay.
But all their money needs to be paid in full, so they can't owe any outstanding money at that point.
Okay. So you probably have a lot of space in your office now that you didn't have before.
We do, but we still have about 400 boxes of files in the basement here, so I don't know that we'll have a surplus of space for quite some time.
Okay. Anyway, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for courts? Okay, we'll move on to CJCC.
Let's see, I'd like to add that the CJCC County Board report will be this week. So we'll have a presentation at the County Board meeting. We did have a CJCC meeting late last week. And we reviewed some of the highlights of that County Board report. We also took a deeper dive into our collective data for 2024, and we made some bylaw changes to the membership, which some of the members were wanting to retain their positions with the CJCC, so that was entertained. And then one for sure that we eliminated was the city attorney for not attending, but regarding the Judiciary and Law Chair, that position was one that was on the chopping block as far as attendance and quorum, but I can't tell you where we ended up with that, so I'm going to have to review that again. And as I mentioned, Supervisor, that you and I can have a conversation offline so you can be more informed about that role in that capacity. If you'd like to retain that chair or that position on the council, then we could re-entertain that as well. So other than that, no updates.
Any questions?
So we have set a date at the end of July to get the kind of leaders of the relevant agencies together that participate in the DNA collection process. And we're really going to kind of map it out. So kind of lay out as far as who needs to have a DNA sample, how that process should go, who should ask them, where should they go, really laid out. We call that mapping. But then that helps us understand what the gaps are so we can make those improvements. So for example, if it's as simple as the judge just saying you need to immediately go downstairs to put in a DNA submission, that could be one of the recommendations that come out of it. But it's really looking at our system, all the players involved, and see if we can shore that up, because we do have missing DNA samples that should be collected overall for us to be in compliance. So that is just a date. Yes, yep, state law. Yep, on convictions of misdemeanors or charges with felony level. So we're just mapping at that July date.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to district attorney.
I don't have anything to add, but happy to answer any questions.
I'd be happy to hear more about prosecuting cryptocurrency scams.
Yeah, it's an interesting training. It's geared more for law enforcement investigators. I know the sheriff's office has one investigator who attended that training and has spoken to our office about collecting information regarding that. But it was basically so a basic understanding of what it entails. It's a whole different investigation and a different prosecution. But I wouldn't say that I don't think I've received any referrals yet regarding cryptocurrency thefts, but I think it's coming in the future.
Where in Dunn County might it occur?
Well, it used to be all Quick Trips had ATMs where you could do Bitcoin exchanges and but I believe that they recently got pulled. I think there's a few in 3 maybe at Dunn County and banks.
Any other questions for the DA? Okay, we'll move on to child support.
Just highlight that I too will be presenting my annual report this Wednesday. So I have nothing to add unless there's any questions.
There we go. Actually, it's about last month's report, which I had thought about. When you had said that there were 7 individuals in Dunn County who did not get their child support due to an IRS not pulling the funds. I was wondering what recourse those 7 individuals had, what options they had, what kind of contingency plans there were for them.
So we were told that if any of the impacted persons were to call our office, we were supposed to refer them to the IRS. The IRS then clarified and said, no, you need to refer them to the Bureau of Financial Institutions because the IRS certified the debt. It was the other division that failed to actually take the funds. So it's, basically what it means is despite having their arrears certified for tax intercept as a collection mechanism,
Correct.
is not going to occur for tax year 2024.
Mhm.
So the debt is still owed and the obligor payer received those funds themselves and they are very welcome to make a payment towards their child support debt through any number of ways themselves. It's just not going to be through that automatic tax intercept process. for
How
that year.
how likely is that to happen? Do you know?
Well,
I just think about those women, most likely single mothers. I know that's probably the majority of who is affected by that. That's kind of a shock. I mean, that's a real setback for them and a difficult, that's a lot for them to have to deal with.
right. So
I just wondered,
I know
what the recourse was.
when we first heard the news that this happened,
Mhm.
we asked the Bureau of Child Support in Madison, could you please quantify this for us? Could you run some sort of report and identify the impacted,
Mhm.
families? And that's how I determined it was just 7 in Dunn County. But between those 7, they owed a substantial amount of money. So it is very likely that these are the folks who aren't kind conscientious about paying their obligations on a reoccurring monthly basis, right? So the tax intercept collection is it's supposed to be a both and. They're supposed to be making payments pursuant to their court order every single month. And we have the ability to get one-time larger sum payments through various things like tax intercept or lien docket would be another one if somebody's trying to trade in a vehicle or, even scrap it. If there's a child support lien on it, they have to negotiate a payment with us. And so they'll say, well, I don't know why I need to make a payment because when I register my new car, the lien's just going to go on that car. Correct, it will. But by releasing the lien on your current vehicle for no payment, sort of, it makes the whole purpose of the lien docket like null and void. The whole point is to negotiate one-time payments when it's important to you, kind of a thing. So it's just hopefully it was just a fluke occurrence this year and they'll get it all figured out for the 2025 tax year. So the problem that we're going to have as an agency is the IRS is very, very strict about our disclosing people's tax information, even to the other party on the case. So if they're used to getting a large $2,000 payment every May, they can infer that it was from a tax intercept, but we're not necessarily going to outright tell them that that was the source of the payment.
Sure.
So while I've received that large payment every year for the last so many years, why didn't I get it this year? We have to be pretty vague and say debts are certified and the seizure will happen if and when a seizure is eligible to take place, period. And it didn't happen this year.
Thank you. I'm sure it was, I'm sure it was distressing to the department also that this was happening, but, okay.
It is. And I asked my staff, do you want to be sort of proactive and I can come up with some sort of a letter to send to the payees and the payors saying this is what occurred and these are the options. And we just decided to let sleeping dogs lie. And if somebody reaches out, then we'll deal with it. But
Okay, thank you. I spent a little time in my life as a single mother myself, so I can relate.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions for child support? Okay, we'll move on to emergency management.
I really didn't have a lot to update other than I know I had reported on the one storm that we had a couple weeks ago that was kind of a non-event. And then this last Thursday, we did have another storm event. And overall, I think Dunn County fared well as far as any major damage or anything. I think we had quite a few trees down and things like that. There was an area in the Colfax area that the National Weather Service did want to come up and survey, and they kind of went through the process of that damage in that area. And it was not a tornado, it was just a downburst. And so we were happy to hear that. But like I said, we did have just a little bit of damage this last Thursday with several trees down and several roadways impacted by that. Other than that, I really don't have an update or anything else to add unless you have questions.
This or something else. I was wondering, you did the tabletop exercises.
Mhm.
What are, on the one about fire, what did you learn or what surprises came up?
On which exercise?
Didn't one have to do with a fire?
We had
Okay.
the Excel Energy one. We had,
No, well, just, what about?
the neighbors.
Okay.
The neighbors, okay. Yeah, that was a virtual exercise that was handled by another agency, and it involved several surrounding communities. And so basically, it was a tabletop where our office joined basically the neighbors of Dunn County, some of their facilities department, and some of the management staff at the neighbors. And we always learn several things, when we go through something like that. And, the first thing is just communication. That is always the first thing that kind of does the breakdown. And that was one thing that they need to work on. And they have been working on it. Everybody has new staff and there's been changes in policies and things like that. So, that was one thing. I think overall as a region, we were learning, like, if we would have to evacuate, if we have to relocate, how would that impact the region per se? I know that Wednesday of this week, we'll be having an actual functional drill at the Neighbors of Dunn County, not based on the tabletop that we did a couple weeks ago, but just their drill just for Dunn County. And it also is going to address like evacuation and some of the communication. So kind of a few things they learned at the tabletop are going to be applied to the very next exercise we're going to do on Wednesday. Not the same scenario, but they're going to be applied to there. So it'll be interesting to see the same players that were involved in that, how they apply that to the exercise that we're going to complete on Wednesday. And that one's always nice because it's actual role playing. What they don't actually evacuate any of the residents. There are a few that come along to help the exercise, but they're not evacuating a whole wing or anything like that. So, it's always good to exercise, but it's good to do it with several agencies because you learn a lot. I mean, what you don't think of, maybe another county or another agency that was on that tabletop did think of, and it kind of piques your curiosity, like, oh yeah, we better think about that, or we better change our policy on that, or we need a policy on that.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing about the exercise on the dam failure.
Yeah, we did the tabletop, and I had a whole page of notes, and I already started kind of working on a few of those before we actually go into that functional one on the 12th of June, so that maybe we can have a little bit better picture. We hope nothing like that ever happens. And, some of those dams have been in place for 100+ years. And it was interesting to learn of all the dams that could impact Dunn County. And you think Lake Wissota, well, that's far enough away that that's really not going to have that huge of an impact on Dunn County. But I think that if I remember correctly, it would be here in like 3.5 to 4 hours, which gives us a little bit of time, which is nice, but I think that it would put us well over flood stage. I wanted to say like 19 feet. That's a lot of water to make it this far, So then it got me thinking, whoa, what about the Cedar Falls Dam? That's minutes. That's literally actually seconds for some of those people that live, just down the stream from Cedar Falls. And that's also seconds for, like the Irvington campground for the Lake Lake Monoman Dam. So, working with GIS to come up with a map, to have those pinpointed on a map and then enter them into code red so that maybe we could send out a code red mass notification to those people like, hey, there's a failure at the dam. Yeah. So it is very interesting. It's very interesting. And, it's always, there's always an impact when you leave those trainings. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the functional one goes too.
Floods in Carolina.
Mhm.
One of the things you see is stuff going into those rivers that shouldn't be in those rivers. Fuels.
Yeah.
Hazardous wastes.
Absolutely. That was one of the notes I made was, public health. I need to probably firm up the communications that I have with KT and her staff. I mean, we do have meetings to talk about these things, I think quarterly at least. But it's one of the things you don't think about that. Like, what is the impact of the thing that items that are going into the water? What is the impact of the water that floods over someone's residence, and how does that affect their well water? Even if it's only over their residence for 4 or 5 hours, how is that going to impact them? And how do we help them? So that was definitely on my list, is to kind of firm up some communication with KT and her staff about floods just in general. I mean, it doesn't have to be a dam break, it can be, flash floods that we have had here in Dunn County. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for emergency management? Okay, we'll move into item number 6, items placed at the request of the chair. A, approve a direction for the hazard mitigation plan. And so at this time, looking for a motion to move forward with one of the 4 options that are listed on the bottom of the emergency management.
I did bring kind of a lengthy document from Chris Straight. He said that he would kind of give us a new version, and I think that, like you said, that was one of the 4 options. I only had 4 of them, so Carl, I emailed it to you because I see you had your computer up, so, and I kind of highlighted, I think it's on page 6, so it's just for discussion once you make a decision, but the information on page 6 is basically one of the options that I listed for you was to have Chris's company go ahead and do a pared down version of the plan. And I think that was around 16,000. And then the other option they gave was a pared down version, but it would include some of the community. So it would include like city of Menominee and some of the villages and things like that wanted to participate. If we do a plan just ourselves with just Dunn County and we don't include them, then they're not eligible for grant funding under this, if there is going to be grant funding. So that's just the information that I had. So it's kind of 16,000 and yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering about, this is a 5-year plan and the one that is currently in place is up in October. I was just wondering how many grants or how many mitigation plans were you able, or were we able to complete?
I think
As a
before we have discussion, we have to have a motion, right, Chris?
before we had any discussion. Yeah, we don't know which one we would pick yet, do we?
Yeah.
Right, but I don't think we can have discussion. Or can we have approve a direction for hazard mitigation plan? Right, and then we can have discussion, right?
Your motion is that we would approve a direction, and then you can come back and clarify that. I think it's worded kind of weird, but.
That's how Dan told us to word it.
No, I think that, no, I mean, it's in the sense that, I think your motion is to move forward with being a plan. A second, okay, you're gonna discuss it.
Then you can pick a plan.
You can pick a plan. And
Okay.
Okay.
Make a motion, we move forward with,
Well, I'll support that.
one of the.
There you go.
There you go. That works.
Motion by Gilbert, second by Calabrese. Discussion on the motion.
Vandermeelen.
What's that? Or man, so not Calabrese, yeah. Sorry.
That's me. Reese over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we can have discussion. Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, it's just that information is in the document. It's a scaled down version. The dollar amount is significantly less. And the caveat on the end of his email was, I'm still hopeful that the feds will come through and we can just do it the way we intended.
To her question,
Mhm.
what money did we get? From, like, out of the last 5-year plan, this mitigation, grants did we apply for, or?
Out of this last 5-year one, I do not think we had applied for one for 300 and some thousand, but it was just denied
Okay.
due to the federal drawbacks. So we had applied for one, it had been approved, but now it has been drawn back. So in the last 5 years, we have 0 approved or 0 completed. I think if you go back 10 years, then we did have one that was funded, completed, and everything was reimbursed.
And those grants were for shit. Something, we had a storm and we got a grant for.
Yeah, they were for prevention, kind of a mitigation type situation, the erosion of the Chippewa River bank.
So that's-
Mm-hmm. The one that was just drawn back was also the same thing, erosion on the Chippewa River bank. Mhm.
So, one of the reasons we might do a plan is that it would enable us to apply for grants, but under current conditions, we're not likely to get any.
Under current conditions, we truly don't know if there will be any.
I read something more recently that said that FEMA is looking at kind of dissolving on the federal level and asking states to take over much more of the responsibility. That doesn't sound to me like there are going to be even grants available if that happens.
Yeah,
That is accurate. What I have heard also. But there's nothing, been definitely decided at this point. And then would the funding then just be coming from the state versus the federal? Like the funding for one of these types of grants, would it just be coming from the state of Wisconsin versus FEMA? That might be the only difference. Because I understood that, if they had the budget, they would disperse it out to the states to manage and to use for mitigation, to use for storm, situations. Um, So the money they have in the federal budget for that, they would disperse to the state of Wisconsin, and then the state of Wisconsin would determine how it was basically doled out to the county level.
And we don't know if that doling out would be based on a report.
We don't know.
Okay.
No.
so
If we
really-
just wait and then 2 years down the road, this comes back, we could just apply then, right?
Not if there's, well, we really don't know, do we?
Yeah, so I believe, yes, we can do that, absolutely. I think the only caveat is, and again, everybody is just speculating. I think the only caveat is that November is generally the time frame when these brick grants or mitigation grants come out, is that if we do not do it and they come out with one in November, we would not be eligible for it. That's the only thing. And, it is what it is. Nobody really knows the honest situation is, will it even come out? It may not. So then we
Good
spend whatever.
It just puts the local government in a really in between a rock and a hard place, really, just not knowing. Because it's sort of, well, maybe it's not worth doing because there might not be funds anyway, but then what if there are and we didn't do it? So,
Yeah.
I,
Yep. And
it's a tough
Chris,
spot.
can I defer to you for like a timeline? So can we just table this again for another month? And then, see if something happens and then do a budget adjustment in July. Do we have a July meeting? We do. Yep. Can do, that's an option too, I guess. I don't know. And because in his time frame, in both of his scenarios, the pared down scenarios, he said that, we probably wouldn't be able to maybe get it 100% done by that October, the end of October. But we would get it approved by early 2026. So it makes you wonder then, would we even be eligible for it anyway?
How elaborate is the 5-year plan? We have a plan and
Yep.
we have a outline of what it's supposed to look like.
Yep.
Is this like,
Yeah, it's several hundred pages long.
Yeah.
It's the meat and potatoes of it, so to say, is not. That's not all of it. I mean, a lot of it is, and I don't want to say cookie cutter because it is applicable just to Dunn County. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
jargon.
Some of it is, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, they do trip you up on some of that. The requirements are a little time consuming. So yeah, the first 75 pages of it probably is exactly what you said. We can go in and change the dates, change the populations, change some of the schematics of things. However, it's the other information that probably has a little bit more um teeth to the situation.
Because this is a plan
Mm-hmm.
for mitigation.
Yeah, correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any grant application or any plan like this has to have some sort of template dictated by likely audience. FEMA had one, but don't anymore unless unless they come up with a new one and do approve this. The state, we wouldn't know what it would be. The template, it's the particular things we would have to address and however many pages. Are there any other audiences besides our own county? In the process of thinking about these things, we might learn some things and decide on some directions so that if something comes along, we might have some sort of small document, at least to say, we've done this work, we've found these things, we're ready to apply for this state grant. Would there be any point in that, or would we be better off just waiting until we find out what state grants might be available?
Yeah, I think, I think right now, the way Chris is looking at it, and it's probably the easiest way to look at it is we're still kind of operating under the FEMA guidelines, even though I think we're not 100% sure what they are. You know what I mean? They've gutted a lot of the things. And so, this is how I look at it, and maybe that's not right, is they gutted the money that comes with this grant, but yet they still left the requirements exactly the same to do a plan. So are those requirements really accurate when you gutted the funding source behind it? Nobody knows the answer to that. Because if you're requiring us to do, 120 things on this checklist, but you're not funding it, do we really have to do the 120 things on the checklist? That's my question. But if we get to November and they say, well, here, Melissa, here's, $700,000, but oh, wait a minute, you didn't do 93 through 107. Sorry, you can't have it. I don't know. I think that's the unknown.
Well, the 700,000 would be.
Right, right. Doesn't necessarily mean we would get it. And, right now, I don't have a project right off the top of my head. The only one that I really always am interested in is storm shelters or safe places, as they call them now. As I mentioned with a dam exercise, like the Irvington campground down there, there's no safe shelter down in that area, or like the Birch Terrace trailer court. I mean, there's several hundred trailer homes there and there's no safe place. So, I mean, that definitely would be something would be, applicable to one of these grants that we would be able to apply for. I think that sometimes we've not made it to the finish line in applying for these grants because it also encompasses like the township level, because technically it's in the township of Menominee. But if they're not interested in, applying, and Dunn County being kind of the sub grant, it's hard. It has to be kind of a collaboration. So, yeah.
Any more speaking of the motion?
Option 3, EM office complete the plan on their own. That sounds like just a smaller kind of summary of what you're talking about. Maybe it's not really so much a plan as some directions to think.
I think we would, if we were going to do that, we would still try and meet those FEMA requirements for the hazard mitigation plan. It's just that we would do all the work ourselves, which would definitely have to be a situation where we would have to reprioritize some of our other projects to take on a project like this. So it would be less impact, less financial impact to the county budget. However, it would definitely impact the workload or the projects that we're already currently in because they would have to be reprioritized. And of course, we would definitely lean on people for help, on what we want to prioritize.
Wisconsin Emergency Management System.
Mhm.
It was grant, they have their own grant system, I assume, I mean.
They do. Several of the funds do come through FEMA though, so they get the money and then it comes,
Yeah.
yep,
they
Yeah.
did, you know,
yep.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have one specific to this. Mhm.
So we,
It's,
It is.
it's tempting to wait some more. It's, it just seems like there's so many unknowns.
There is. It's very frustrating.
Yeah,
We could wait and see.
Do I-
I don't know how long we can do that before.
so we had a motion to
not
come
enough
up with make a plan.
Mhm.
Do we have a motion? Yes. Do we have a
Well, it's
motion?
closest to number 4, which on a later date, we could change if we have a reason to do so.
Mhm.
But,
Right now would be number 4.
yeah,
just to wait and see.
okay.
For now,
Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion
Okay.
to wait, to not complete it, postpone, right?
So motion has been made to postpone,
Postpone the decision.
to
There you go.
the
Kick
decision or to
kick the can
complete a
down the
hazard mitigation? So at this point, we're gonna have a motion.
Well,
Uh,
our original motion was to pick basically one of the 4 choices,
Pick a plan.
well,
Right.
of which one of them was don't make one. So we're planning to not make one.
Today.
No.
Yep.
No,
So we have,
The understanding that if later Melissa found a really good reason to do it, we would reconsider that. We would look at it, the new situation.
Sure.
The
Okay.
difference to postponing it would be postponing your decision.
right.
If you want to just put this aside until you want to bring it back, then you can postpone it, which kind of kills it. Or you could pick your option number or whatever and
Mhm.
bring it back when the time is right.
I don't think we should totally kill it at this point.
No.
no,
Postpone.
Second.
so a motion to postpone to a later date.
Probably postpone indefinitely.
So motion made by Supervisor Welsh, seconded by Gilbert. Called you Calabrese.
Yeah, you called everybody.
Yeah. Any more speaking in the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to number 7. There's nothing there. And now I move on to item 8 because there's no budget to talk about. There's nothing to do there. So item 9, announcements. Can we tell them maybe next month we're gonna be next month's meeting, Katie?
I think so. I
Okay.
spoke to IT.
Next month,
It's-
okay.
Okay, yeah.
So next month's meeting, we're gonna be meeting over at the Judicial Center instead of here, so. Multi-purpose, where is that? Yep, okay.
CJCC.
Our next meeting is June 23rd, 2025, and our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Staying then in the Judicial Center.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, it's like
From now on.
half mile closer.
Yeah.
Well, just because everybody.
Good deal.
Was everybody on the committee except you? And that, okay.